Hi everyone, hope you're well today. Today we're going to be focusing on some of the components of the macro environment. So remember we said the macro environment is the external environment. So this is everything which is on the outside of the business and we cannot control any of these factors. And a good way to remember these factors is by using the PESTLE analysis. So political, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental. Let's have a look at each of these. The political environment. This is everything with regard to government policy. It has to do with all the laws and legislation that is passed by government. It can include things like political unrest or political instability. Another example can be tax policy that government implements. So if government decides to increase VAT, that's obviously going to have a huge effect on businesses. So remember we said all of these factors are external to the business. We cannot control these. So when government implements new laws and legislation, it is completely out of the business's hands. Next, we have our economic environment. So our economic environment includes things like interest rates, inflation rates, the petrol price, and so on. And obviously, if you are in the production industry, if your petrol price increases, it means your transport costs are going to increase, which means your selling price has to increase, which means that consumers will be affected at the end of the day. Another example of the economic environment can be borrowing on credit. So this is again, we will have our banks that come into play. You'll have to apply for a bank loan and they will assess the risk of borrowing your business the money and so forth. And then our exchange rates. This has to do with what is our rand value in terms of foreign currencies, like our rand dollar exchange rates, the rand to the pound, rand to the euro, etc. Our next environment is the social environment, and this includes things like your cultural and demographics of your consumers or of the business. So some social issues can be things like poverty, unemployment, crime. So any socio-economic issue would fall under social issues. It can also be some health issues like HIV and AIDS and your TB. Some other examples of our social issues can be low levels of literacy. So this has to do with our education level. It has to do with how many people are able to read and write. So it basically comes down to our education system. And then we also have social and cultural diversity. And as we know, we live in a rainbow nation in South Africa, and we have many diverse nations, cultures, beliefs, religions, and values. Our next environment is the technological environment. Nowadays, this is so important for any business to keep up to date with the latest trends, to keep ahead of competitors, and just to know what is happening in the world out there. So some advances in technology can be our wireless communication, smartphones, different apps that we use on a day-to-day basis to run our business. It can be technical skills. So you actually now need to employ people who are advanced in technology, people who actually have the skills to operate equipment and use apps or build apps for your business. Other examples or why the technological environment could be a problem for businesses. It has high maintenance costs. So even though businesses need technology, even though they want to stay up to date with technology, it is very expensive. And the thing about technology is that it is constantly changing. Technology gets outdated so quickly, and obviously it costs money for the business to buy the latest technology all the time. Then we have our legal environment. So the legal environment has to do with all the laws and acts. So for example, the Skills Development Act, the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, we have the Labor Relations Act. So these are all the acts and laws that businesses need to adhere to. Some other examples that we've spoken about before include the Consumer Protection Act as well as the National Credit Act. And again, remember, these are all factors which are external to the business. So the business cannot control what is said in these laws. The business, unfortunately, just needs to adhere to them, or they will face penalties in the form of fines and so forth. Then we have our environmental environment, which includes things like the global environment. It can also refer to our natural and physical environment. So this has to do with looking after our natural resources, making sure that the business does not just use up all the raw materials, all the natural resources without thinking about future generations. Then it can also include globalization. So this means that businesses are now operating on an international base. So that means your competitors are not just local businesses anymore, but it's also now businesses in other countries that you are competing with. Can also be things like health issues like the COVID-19 pandemic. So remember, all of these PESTLE elements that we've spoken about, these are all the elements from the macro environment. And it's just a very nice, simple way to remember is to remember your PESTLE, your PESTLE. And then you will know exactly what the elements of the macro environment are. And also just very important to remember, the macro environment is external to the business. You have absolutely no control over these elements. I hope you enjoyed today's lesson. Have a lovely day further.